I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We are so happy to have you here today. I don't know why it's so funny.
I don't know either. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about classrooms.
Yes.
And creating effective OT sessions in the classroom. So this episode is really great if you are a therapist working in the schools, but this is also great for teachers or parents who are homeschooling. If you work in an outpatient clinic, this is great because then you can provide some of this information to your client's family or teacher to help them as well.
Yeah, really the motivation for this episode too is we've been working on rebranding, updating, renovating our classroom course that is launching in August of 2024, depending on when you're listening to this.
Or watching it.
Or watching this, yes. And we wanted to just give some pointers because we're in the thick of classrooms and sensory strategies and reflexes. So how can we connect, the focus of OT in the schools, bring it all together, like Jessica mentioned, basically help everyone who's helping kids in the school setting.
So first, we need to talk about what's the goal of occupational therapy in the schools.
And I think the biggest is function and how it's impacting academic performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in order for a student to qualify for OT services in the schools, that whatever challenges they're having has to be impacting their ability to complete the academics that are required of them.
Which I honestly don't love that.
I know.
About school OT in general, but that's neither here nor there.
That's a whole nother story.
The underlying skills for handwriting, fine motor skills, can the child write their name? Can they stay in the lines? Focusing on those 8 core principles of handwriting. That's a big part of OT in the schools as well.
Another one is going to be sensory processing, because the way a student processes the sensory world is going to impact their ability to self-regulate. It's going to impact their attention, their memory, their emotions, their social skills, everything.
Primitive reflexes. Y'all know we are obsessed with primitive reflexes. You know that they can impact just the child's ability to sit and focus in the classroom, executive functioning skills, posture, balance, coordination. There are so many underlying skills connected to retained primitive reflexes, and it's something that is often overlooked, underlooked. We're not addressing it. It's a behavior. The child can't sit still. They're acting out. Well, have we looked at their reflexes? That's a big part.
Mm-hmm. And then we're also going to look at their communication and their social skills. That's a huge piece of being in school, especially a public school, is the students are interacting with each other, they're communicating. And if their challenges are impacting that, then it hinders their academic performance.
And then, like I mentioned, with the primitive reflexes, the executive functioning skills too. Can they plan their day? Can they organize their materials? Can they understand what materials they need to take home for a book report? Can they take those home and bring them back to school? Can they set goals for themselves? Can they manage their time? Those are huge components to just success in school, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you are an OT working in the schools, where do you focus? You focus on all the things we just talked about.
Yes. And I think the main point that we want to get across here is that we're focusing on function, and what does function mean?
Oh, lately I've heard that people don't like the term function.
What?
Or like
who?
Function based, or how, are they functioning? It's another one of those social media things I think that's coming out of, we don't like that term, but I'm like, or functional.
Okay. I guess, and that's not how I'm thinking of it though, is the problem.
Oh, that's how I'm thinking of it.
I'm thinking of focusing on function. Like how are these underlying skills impacting the child's ability to get through their day? Functionally, yeah.
I know people don't like that word anymore.
It's not like high functioning or low functioning.
I know.
That's not how I'm envisioning it.
No, it's different. I understand.
It's function.
I know.
It's function.
I know. People don't like it. I don't know.
Well, can we keep it?
I'm keeping it. I've been keeping it. It just made me think of that.
Heard that.
I don't remember where I heard it, but yeah.
Ugh, okay.
Anyways, focusing on function means that we're looking at how the student is able to get through their school day. Mm-hmm. Are they able to, or are they not able to? Mm-hmm. Because of sensory processing, because of primitive reflexes, because of executive function skills. We need to identify that underlying reason why, so that we know where to focus the OT treatment.
Exactly. Then we're looking at sensory processing, emotional regulation, self-regulation, emotional intelligence. Can the child regulate their body? Can they regulate their emotions? Can they communicate however they communicate their feelings for a situation, their need for a brain break or a sensory break, that they are feeling overwhelmed or they're anxious or they're uncomfortable? Can they successfully do that? Mm-hmm. I feel like it's harder and harder these days.
Sure, maybe.
I don't know.
It might be. We also want to focus on, again, I think we might have already said this, but we want to focus on the underlying skills, right? So if you are working with a student and you're focusing on handwriting, you can't just sit down and have your OT session be just having them practice handwriting. You need to dig deeper and look at the underlying reasons why handwriting is difficult. Is it hand strength, postural control? Is it visual perception, ocular motor? Is it the executive functioning piece? Is it the visual spatial relations? Is it a little bit of everything?
Is it retained primitive reflexes?
Which it relates to all of those things as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So we also want to look at accommodations for the classroom for these students, and you're going to work with the teacher for this part, which we're going to get into, because that is a huge piece of it. Whether you're pushing into the classroom or pulling the student out, the majority of the student's time is spent in the classroom with their teacher or teachers, if they have multiple.
If possible.
And so you need to be working with the teachers in a collaborative way to provide modifications and accommodations for specific students.
And educating the teachers, like you kind of mentioned, educating the teachers, this is the sensory system. When a child is doing this, it could be because of X, Y, and Z. It's not always just because they're being naughty or because they're acting out.
That's really
generally they're trying to communicate something, or they're trying
are.
to let us know that they're uncomfortable or dysregulated.
Yes, always, I say.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about that in our course.
We do. And I was just going to say, this is one of the tips that we provide in our course specifically for OT practitioners, is provide like an in-service training for the teachers in the school you're working at to teach them these things. It doesn't have to be long. It could be an hour, and, provide lunch or something, whatever it is, but create some sort of in-service for the teachers so that they have some of that background knowledge, because it's really hard to do it in the middle of the school day. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And, if you give a handout to the teacher, what are the chances that that handout's going to get mixed in with thousands of other papers, right? So if you can figure out a way to do some sort of in-service training, I think that would be the most beneficial.
Well, I think too, it's frustrating that teachers aren't getting this knowledge, especially special ed. I think a lot of special ed teachers aren't getting this education about the sensory system and reflexes and all the things that we talk about, which is honestly why we created the course that we created. Not, shameless plug, whatever it's called, trying to say, like, if a teacher is interacting with 30 students throughout the day, generally I'd say at least 5 respectively have sensory processing disorders, sensory processing challenges. I'd say at least 10 respectively have at least one retained primitive reflex.
Well, there is some research to show the certain numbers, but it's iffy.
It's varying, yeah.
But, it's our same complaint with pediatricians is that they don't have
Yes.
this background knowledge either. So
We shouldn't say complaint. We're not complaining. We're just
complaining.
saying we're not supporting our students to the best of our abilities when we don't have this underlying knowledge of the sensory system and reflexes and finding that underlying why and really trying to support them from the inside out. Because the next thing that we wrote down on our outline was finding that connection between our kiddos. Students should be able to go to school and feel that connection with their teacher and with their peers. And we want them to feel that connection. We want them to feel like they're going to a safe place. We want their therapist to be someone who they can talk to and have open conversations, and they're excited to go to OT today or speech therapy or whatever therapy they're going to, rather than, I have to go see Mrs. Harrington again. She's the worst. She's so mean. She's not fun at all.
I've thought that about many teachers in my life. Unfortunately.
But I also have thought like so many good things about teachers. Like I would go and have dinner at like some of my elementary school teachers' houses if I could.
You did that? That's so cute.
No, but I'm like,
if you could.
Yeah, like they were neighbors, they lived in our neighborhood.
I thought you said you did.
No,
I
no.
was like, that's so cute.
But having that connection of like, one time I accidentally called my teacher mom on the phone because I like picked up the phone. I was like, hey mom. Oh, hi Mrs. McCoy. Sorry.
Little kids totally do that because Logan has done stuff like that before.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But anyways, you have that connection with them and you feel like they're family. Yep. And you want to just, but then you also have the mean ones who you just don't connect with. So don't be a mean teacher. Don't be a mean therapist. Find connection, build rapport.
Can that be the title of this episode?
Don't be a mean therapist.
Or teacher.
But honestly, it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds so weird saying this out loud, but I just feel like I'm very passionate about that empathy and building the connection with people. I just love connections.
It's very important.
As you know.
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's why you never stop talking. Yes, I think building that rapport with the students that you're working with and building the rapport with the teachers and the other therapists that you're working with is huge. You'll make so much more progress. You will feel less burnout if you can work collaboratively with the other people, the other adults. So hopefully you can build that relationship.
Mm-hmm. So now that I've chatted your ear off, let's talk.
Are you saying I haven't talked at all?
You've talked a perfect amount. I just sometimes go above and beyond. It's funny story. Last night, Daniel and I went on a walk by ourselves, and I just wanted to talk and talk. Hey, babe, what do you think about this? What about this? What about this? All the things. And he's like, can we just walk in silence? And I'm like, we don't get to talk all day. I just want to talk to you.
Oh.
So this is my time to talk to all of you.
I was going to say, did you walk in silence?
Yes.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, I got my feelings hurt. I was like, fine.
Oh, you did not.
We'll just sit here and walk in silence.
All right, since you've been talking so much, what's next?
What's next? An effective treatment session. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of variety. Let's go through a quick little example.
Yeah, I think, if you're pulling a student out to do your 30, it's typically 30 minutes.
In the schools, I think.
In the school setting, you pull them out of the classroom for your 30 minutes. I think starting with some sort of circuit that is focused on sensory and primitive reflexes is going to be great. So ideally, you have identified this student's sensory needs. What type of sensory input do they need to feel calm and regulated? What primitive reflexes are they showing signs of? So you can incorporate some of that. Doesn't have to be super complex, but it needs to be fun and engaging. Something like, some frog jumps, some cat-cows, maybe blowing something across the floor, maybe doing Bubble Mountain, getting their entire body, their entire nervous system set up for whatever comes next.
Have a conversation with them. Ask them how their day has been.
Oh, yeah, you definitely want to do that.
Go outside if possible as well. I feel like that's kind of an underrated tool that we need to make sure that we're taken advantage of.
If you can't go outside, can you go to a room that has natural lighting?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So kind of a preparatory activity, warm-up activity, a little circuit, fresh air, fresh ideas, go outside, smell the roses, blow out the candles. And then we're going to focus on... God, I'm so sorry. I'm Sorry. Okay. And then we're going to focus on a function-based activity. So going back to what Jessica mentioned about the handwriting, we're working on, maybe if that's the goal, this child struggles with handwriting overall. We're working on some of those underlying skills for handwriting. So maybe we're playing a game and we're squeezing one of those pop balls and we're popping the balls and squeezing the toy, and we're strengthening our hands. Maybe we're working on therapeutic. Maybe we're working on making letters out of our bodies or making our letters out of Play-Doh.
I will say those would be great to also incorporate into the warm-up.
True.
Potentially.
True.
If you do need to be actually practicing the handwriting and actually doing the actual handwriting in your session, then doing those specific warm-ups as part of that circuit and incorporating them into the circuit in the beginning would be great.
Yeah. And then when you are working on those functional activities, change
functional
it up.
academic based
Yes,
activities,
thank you.
because we're in the schools, right?
Doing things like having them write while they're laying on their tummies, or have them write on a whiteboard or on a vertical surface while they're holding their paper. So they're working on the handwriting, but it's in a more accommodative, strength building position. And sometimes just changing the position of a rote, boring activity can be a huge positive for the child.
And I will say there's a lot of different games that you can incorporate handwriting into.
Oh, every game.
We've done this in the clinic all the time, and I've done it in treatment sessions where you're playing some sort of game, some sort of board game, or I've done this with Battleship, and you are doing handwriting in this game. So that can be a really great strategy to make handwriting more fun and more motivating. Still working on those things that the student needs to focus on, whether it's placement on the line, spacing, sequencing, grasp, whatever it is.
Yep. And then lastly, before you wrap up, focus on regulation, focus on, we didn't talk about this, but using something like the zones of regulation or the sensory emotions from our sensory diet course, really checking in at the beginning of the session, in the middle of the session, at the end of the session. How are we feeling? What zone are we in? What strategies are we going to use going back to the classroom? How are we going to advocate for our needs when we go back to the classroom? Focus on deep breathing, heavy work, calming, crawling, metronome activities to really ground and center the child if possible. Making sure that if you are working with a kiddo with a high sensory threshold, maybe they are seeking vestibular input, you're meeting that threshold during OT and you're giving them an opportunity to go outside and run laps a few times before they come in and sit down and do their work.
Yep. Yeah, you don't want to send them back to the classroom amped up.
Correct.
And overstimulated or understimulated.
That will give you a ticket to the bad side of the teacher's
Yeah, the
side.
teacher's going to be very upset with you at this point, especially if you do it multiple times. Of course, it's not always going to be perfect. There might be a day or a couple of times where the student goes back to class and they are a little dysregulated. And maybe you did everything you could to provide them with the regulating strategies, but they got terrible sleep or they have a stomach ache. And
they had too much food dye.
Things outside of your control, but you do the best you can and you're communicating with the teacher as well.
What we didn't talk about as a great warm-up activity as part of our example is getting a drink of water.
Always get a drink of water.
I know you have recently, not even recently, you've added that into your treatment sessions.
Every session.
And it makes a huge difference for your kids.
Every single child that I work with, I swear, every single one of them is dehydrated when they come in.
Yeah.
No fault of the parents necessarily. It's just, my own child will get dehydrated because kids are kids.
They forget to drink.
They're not thinking about it. Sometimes I forget to drink my water. So
speaking of which.
Yeah, drink your water. Yes, starting every session with a drink of water is a great strategy.
Yeah.
Maybe checking in and seeing if the student needs to use the bathroom really quick, because that's also going to impact their regulation.
Plus, you can work on so many underlying skills going to the bathroom. You can work on dressing, you can work on hand washing, you can work on those fine motor skills, the sequencing.
Now, I don't know,
having
not worked in the schools,
if that is feasible.
Yeah, I have worked in the schools during my field work many, many years ago. So I don't recall if that would count towards
I don't know either.
Session.
Let us know. Let us know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think hopefully this was helpful. If you are a therapist working in the schools, we'd love to know your thoughts. Was this helpful? Do you want more? If you do want more, check out our classroom course. It was designed for teachers and educators, but we have also added in some new things for therapists. We're in the process of getting it approved for continuing education. By the time this episode comes out, it might already be approved, or it's going to be really close. So
It will be approved.
Well, it will be,
obviously.
but I'm just saying.
Yes. By the time the course launches, it will be AOTA
Yes.
approved. You will get CEUs for therapists
Yes.
doing the course.
Yes.
Teachers should take it. Homeschool parents should take it.
Yep.
It's just overall a very robust course,
Yes.
just like all of our previous courses have been. So we're really excited about it.
Yep. All right. Hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah.
We love it when you take a screenshot of listening to this episode.
Should we say cheese for them to take a screenshot right now?
Sure.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheese.
Share it on social media and tag us. We're at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, just know that we are on video on YouTube now, so you can watch us.
Yeah.
Hint, hint. If you're watching us, make sure that you like this video, leave us a comment, subscribe, all the things.
And our final disclosure, if you are a parent listening to this and you have a child and you are concerned with their development, their academics, if you're concerned at all, we highly recommend getting in-person occupational therapy services. When in doubt, rule it out. An OT evaluation will be really helpful. Make sure that you are advocating for someone who is trained in sensory integration as well as primitive reflex integration.
Okay, with that, we're done.
We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.